This is the channel's new brand ambassador. Well, one of two. Her name is Baby Squirrel. Sometimes called Baby Squirrel 3000. Often just Squirrel. She's new to the apartment. And has mostly been just hiding under the bed with her mom, Prisma. If there's one thing this cat loves, it's the Epic of Gilgamesh. She is really into it. I mean, can't get her to stop reading it, honestly. I'm like, come on, it's 5,000 years old. What's the rush, you know? Sometimes she mixes it up, reads different translations. She's not a snob, you know. She'll read a free verse translation. So you really like it, huh? Squirrel, what do you think of the Epic of Gilgamesh? What do you think? Yeah, I know. Well, I'll tell you, this is a really impressive work, and it's one I'm going to read and reread my whole life. I might write my own version sometime. I mean, like, try a translation and have some twist. Gilgamesh is one I feel deep in my bones. It's when I start thinking, yeah, there's probably something to epigenetics. We must encode information in our genes, bits of stories. Haven't you ever stood around a fire and thought, I feel like I've been doing this for longer than I've been alive? Or torn into some really delicious food? Eating is one of those ancient things, you know? I think meat in particular can wake up something primal when you're eating meat sometimes. I feel that. I think looking at the stars is a big one. There's something, I mean, we've been trying to make sense of that craziness over our heads for all of existence. And for a long time, the only thing we had was vibes and observation, I guess. But I'll tell you, this is just a great book. I've never read this translation before, but this translation was a pleasure. And it's made me decide something. I'm just going to continually acquire, from now on through the life of this whole channel, more editions of Gilgamesh and read and review them until maybe eventually I'll have read and commented on every translation that is commonly available in English. Because I used to have several copies of this in different translations, and that felt good. I want to go back to that. I don't know what happened to them all. I don't think they were lost as part of the purge. I think they were given away to people I thought needed a little Gilgamesh in their lives. The version I've read the most is Stephen Mitchell's Gilgamesh, a New English Version from 2004. But this, apparently, according to the notes on the book itself, Gilgamesh, this was the most widely read version for a long time. A verse narrative by Herbert Mason, who has a little autobiographical afterword and reveals himself to be a very interesting person. A real scholar who had adventures in drama. It's wild to think that one of the first American Jamestown colonists was translating Ovid in a walled fort. So crazy. But Gilgamesh, this is wild. This book is so old, it was a key influence on the Bible. Oh my gosh. And on the Odyssey. There are definitely passages echoed in the Odyssey. It's an Eastern work that had a major effect on the West, which I suspect was much more common than we know if you look at the roots of mathematics and philosophy. So I'm hesitant to even do this video because there is so much Gilgamesh content on YouTube, including this incredible channel I'm in the middle of watching all of, and I feel like I know nothing listening to her. I think it's called Elizabeth Marie is the handle. That's her name. And the name is like Roots of something, some obscure word I don't know. It starts with an R. I really should make notes before these videos. I'm sorry, everybody. I'll start doing that. But look up Elizabeth Marie and her Gilgamesh videos. She's got linguistics of Gilgamesh, textual analysis of Gilgamesh. She is coming at it from all these different angles, and she's like a poet and musician herself and understands art and talks about it in such a good way. I'm like gonna be watching these videos all week, I know it. And definitely today, because I can't go to work today because I have to get re-fingerprinted to get recertified at work. So they're like, you don't need income, right? You're just good without income. All right, bye. But go find those Gilgamesh videos on YouTube, because even if you've never read Gilgamesh and have no particular plans to read Gilgamesh, which why wouldn't you? It's really short. It's definitely something to have in your pocket, and you'll have this connection to ancient times. Oh, I was talking about genetic imprinting. No, what's that called? Epigenetics. I definitely feel like I've had like cultural memories before. Like I feel like I have an unnatural fear of fire. Like in the house, like if people are lighting candles, I'm always just like, oh, you're gonna burn to death. Like, is that imprinted in my genes somewhere? No, that couldn't be, because how would that evolutionary desire? I guess if you saw other people affected negatively by fire, like many generations of people losing stuff. But it is weird that like a cat that's spent its whole life inside, if you set a cucumber next to it, it'll be like, ah, snake. You've never seen a snake. What's that fear coming from? Anyway, I think who we are is stamped deep into who we are. I mean, Gilgamesh, there are some wild YouTube videos about it. There's YouTube videos that say this is about a race of angels, the Nephilim, and they came to Earth. And other people who say it is, but the Nephilim are, what do they say, aliens. Like they were 17 feet tall and had impossible skills and age life, or what do they call it? Life expectancies, lifespans. And then it gets into like the Iraq War, like Gilgamesh's tomb was found in the early 2000s, and then America immediately went in there and like ransacked it during the invasion, to the point that everyone's like, what's that about? Anyway, it's so cool. I don't know. When you start thinking about ancient times, and it does invite thought about all kinds of things, who we are. And I think some of that stuff is interesting just to think about and entertain. But on a historical, genetic level, all this stuff is so great. And folklore over deep time is fascinating. I love how, things existing in time changes them, and you get to see their influence over time. And of course, Gilgamesh is interesting because then it had a big gap of not being a big influence, because at least not directly, because it was lost. Rediscovered in 1847 in Nineveh, the ancient city of Nineveh, by a guy I hope I'm related to, well, in part by him, and first translated by him, Assyriologists, people that study ancient cuneiform text, the first known lasting writing. Though apparently this work was Sumerian and Akkadian. Everyone should watch the Bollywood movie Mohenjo-Daro, about one of those early cities. It's great. I love that movie. Probably not historically accurate, but it's a great movie. Of course, that's an Indian city. But, I wish I could just see all the time human history. Thank you, movies and books, for allowing us to access some of that. And my dreams. I'll tell you, though, I was reminded of Mary Barnard's very colloquial translation of Sappho reading this, because it's just warm. It feels like the time that it came from, 60s and 70s, like it's an accessible, friendly, more casual voice almost. But I also didn't feel like this is, like there's a translation of Gilgamesh that mentions video games and things, a more recent one. And that's like, making the choice to update things in a big way. Every translation I've heard is really like a rewriting, because there's no one-to-one language, Hey, this language equals another language. But according to that YouTube channel I've been watching, the original is in couplets, in stanzas of 2 couplets apiece. This looks more free verse. But so Gilgamesh is this powerful, corrupt king of Uruk. Maybe he's taller than everybody else. Maybe he has more powers. He's kind of one of a kind. He's like Bahubali, speaking of Bollywood movies. I love Bollywood movies. Or The Rock, to use an English reference in many of his movies. Just someone like super powerful and gifted. Any Fast and the Furious character. But he's out of control. I mean, Saddam Hussein loved this guy. I don't think anyone remembers him too fondly. But at least he had a note of scholarship in his life. But yeah, Uruk, Iraq, Uruk, or the biblical Erech, was the one of the first cities, Mesopotamia. Love that setting. I've always wanted to write an Exorcist prequel about Pazuzu himself. That's the best part of that whole franchise, is that one scene in Mesopotamia. Or Iraq. rock or wherever they're filming that. Why are you worried about death? Only the gods are immortal anyway, sighed Gilgamesh. Many beautiful details. So anyway, the people pray to the gods, hey, can you get this corrupt king out of here that's so much more powerful than us? And the gods create Enkidu, who's Gilgamesh's equal, but he's wild. I wonder if this is echoed in Cain and Abel in the Bible later on a little bit. One representing a more, civilization-attached being, one wilderness. But Enkidu is kind of brought into humanity by a sacred prostitute who's sent to him. I am alone and I have longed for some companionship. My people also have grown tired of my solitude. They're like, you're horrible. I have too much free time and no checks and balances. So things get a little heated with Enkidu and the prostitute. When my son was young, I saw him reading the Epic of Gilgamesh. I'm like, oh, that's great. You're reading a classic book that I told you about. And that New English translation is very accessible. But then, oh my gosh, I realized he got to this part. He was way too young for this part. I was like, oh, shoot. Oh, no. He was reading it in the car. I had to take the book and be like, why don't you read this a little later? I wouldn't have recommended that to you yet. Epic of Gilgamesh also contains descriptions of dreams. So anyway, Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight. Because Gilgamesh is like a horrible, corrupt leader. And he has that horrible old practice of getting to sleep with every bride on her wedding night before her husband. And, is hated for that. But he and Enkidu fight, and then eventually they're like, no, we should actually be best friends. Because, no one else is like us. What a fight. And then they become best friends, and they're like, let's go do adventures. And they're like, let's go kill the creature that guards the sacred cedar forest that the gods place there. Yeah, woo! And they kill that and destroy the whole forest in the meanwhile. This creature was the protector of the ecosystem. What you doing? They also kill the bull of heaven, and Enkidu does directly. And Gilgamesh is 2/3 god, the text says, so he gets spared for the destructive actions, but Enkidu has to pay, and he pays with his life. And then Gilgamesh can't handle it, so he goes to the underworld. But his trip to the underworld is just a series of discoveries that you can't really come back from the underworld. And it's really fascinating. And this is all pieced together from ancient clay tablets. Incredible. And it differs from the Odyssey and the Iliad, apparently, in that it's not necessarily it wasn't ever an oral tradition. It's written down. Maybe it was. I bet it was. It seems like everything would get repeated a little bit before it got written down back in the day. How else would you craft it and put it, anyway. But if you see this edition, recommended. A real pleasure. The original text, a real pleasure. All the commentaries were super interesting. Everything had life to me, he heard Enkidu murmur. The sky, the storm, the earth, water wandering, the moon and its 3 children, salt. Even my hand had life. It's gone. It's gone. He tried to recollect aloud their life together that had been so brief, so empty of gestures they never felt they had to make. Oh yeah, and Gilgamesh and Enkidu's relationship is very seems like they were definitely romantic as well. I mean, yeah, people's relations were different back in the day, but it's not just friends. I had another dream. This time the heavens were alive with fire, but soon the clouds began to thicken. Death rained down on us. The lightning flashes stopped, and everything which rained down turned to ashes. What does this mean, Enkidu? Visions of an apocalyptic future 5,000 years before. No, something else. Oh, I love this line. Came the flood. Oh, when the 7th day came, the flood subsided from its slaughter like hair drawn slowly back from a tormented face. Yeah. New possessions, now debris, floated on the water with their special sterile vacancy. incredible. This is wild. Many years ago, through loss, I learned that love is wrung from our inmost heart until only the loved one is, and we are not. What? Tattoo worthy, really. Time and space were uneventful now. Stay here and sleep. Begin your life again. You have come so far. You need much sleep. Yeah, reading really ancient books, it's different than just reading a really good book. Because, I think this is a really good read. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I read it partly in a Denny's while eating. And people were looking at me like, what's that guy doing? He appears to be really enjoying a book about Gilgamesh. But it's not just about that. It's about what I call, a little term I came up with long ago, the collapse of time, where you have those moments where it's like there's not really any time between you and what you're experiencing. Like you're getting a little taste of how the air tasted, how it felt. Something really different. I mean, there's a part in Gilgamesh, I'll say the whole name, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, where he goes down a tunnel that the sun sets into every day. The sun goes into a tunnel. That was their cosmology. And he's got to keep ahead of it. It's amazing. But that is from another time in his mentality. It's so cool. It's so cool we have anything this old. 4,300 years is what I heard, and the story might be much older. Let's just say 5,000. There's beautiful poetry in this too, great lines. At one point, the stars are described as glittering in the heavens like mica in a riverbank. What? Like those old people who forget their listeners have not lived through their past with them, mentioning names that no one knows. That's the stand-up comedy of ancient Sumeria right there. You know how old people are always telling stories? And they think you know everyone they're talking about, but you don't know any of them. That same comedian was probably like, you know how you're all excited for your wedding night and then King Gilgamesh hears about it? Like the Tolkien cycle, this poem will be read with profit and joy for generations to come. And Herbert Mason's retelling of Gilgamesh, this age-old story, is recreated with such touching immediacy that the myth breaks on us anew as irresistibly as dawn. By its deepening light, we repossess a world of shared feeling which strengthens us to bear with the loss we are all born to by reminding us of the heroic wealth of our desire. Yeah, in a lot of ways, this is a lot smaller of a narrative than the Odyssey would be later on, because it's really about guy makes a friend dies, guy tries to bring his friend back to life, discovers you can't do that. It doesn't quite have the scope, even though it does go to the underworld. And there's flashback stories, including a really Noah's Flood type story that probably led to that other one in the Bible. Just this book's amazing. Everyone should have a bit of Gilgamesh literacy. There is a great Harvard lecture I've been watching by a professor with a real sense of humor who brings modern elements into it. I really appreciate it. On YouTube, it's an hour and a half long, and I'm mostly done with that. It's good. I've fallen asleep to it twice, so I need to keep watching the ending. This book is technically by Anonymous. And Anonymous has had a really interesting writing career. I mean, they also wrote this work of pre-Victorian erotica, The Lustful Turk, and Go Ask Alice, a harrowing pseudo-memoir of addiction, and Jay's Journal about a kid that got too into Dungeons and Dragons. And, that was pretty wild when Anonymous came back to write those. Oh, along with Primary Colors about Bill Clinton, but with the names changed. I'm joking. Different Anonymous. But Anonymous is an interesting topic. That would be kind of a wild thing to approach, a single author. If you had an interesting, Borgesian book review analysis, all the works of Anonymous as if by a single author. But I'm just joking around. But 2 of those 3 books will be in the paperback challenge. The Jay's Journal is in the weird book section. So I'm going to read this one next. I like how it's organized. Look at that. It's exactly half commentary and text and half the actual book. It's awesome. Oh, this translation predates the one I just read. N.K. Sanders. But I recommend this very highly, and so does my cat. And I also really recommend looking up that YouTube channel about the etymology and linguistics and poetics of Gilgamesh. So good and worthwhile. I'm going to keep watching it. Elizabeth Marie, I think her name is. And then I also really recommend that Harvard lecture that's on YouTube. And just look around for Gilgamesh stuff. There's some interesting stuff out there. And even if you don't accept this or that interpretation or angle, it's like so cool what a place this has in culture. Like, you could easily write a book like Dive Deeper was about Moby Dick, about Gilgamesh's influence throughout. I'm sure there are books like that. But to like know this book and be aware of this book, you kind of like want to become a scholar of it. You want to know things about it. It draws you in. It does feel like some shared deep history that's imprinted into all of us. You know, ancient stuff, humanity, reckoning with its duality of natural and civilized, and humanity reckoning with the seeming permanence of death. And in a way, it's a transformational story. Does Gilgamesh change? You know, is he always an anti-hero, or does he I think he changes by becoming more human. Would Gilgamesh be the same sort of king if he went back after all this? Maybe. Probably not. Well, that's another thing. This guy probably was a historical figure. Some think he was the biblical Nimrod. Some names come to be insults. The origins of the ancient Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh extend back to the 3rd millennium BC, 1500 years before Homer. The story of a great king and his doomed friend was passed on to the Babylonians, who made it their national epic, and its rediscovery in the 19th century sparked an interest that has steadily grown. Its themes are love and death. Yeah, you know you've just read a good book when you're already kind of like thinking about how you're going to continue to read it and have it in your life more. I mean, I don't know how many times I've read Gilgamesh. I've taught Gilgamesh, and we would read the whole thing every time, so maybe a dozen. And I used to have the audiobook of the Stephen Mitchell version, which I would just play. So, yeah, Gilgamesh. But maybe I'm a little rusty on the subject. Yeah, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on Gilgamesh. Let's talk it up in the comments if you want. Or just go read Gilgamesh. Or read it to your cats. Or have your cat read it to you. If you do that, please put it online. Gilgamesh, 100% fresh. That's my review. I want to go do a Gilgamesh tour someday. Go see all the sights from Gilgamesh. What did you think of Squirrel? So that was a pretty ringing endorsement. All right. Well, take care, everybody. Thanks for following. 167 followers. That's pretty cool. You know, that anyone watches videos that I make is cool to me. I appreciate it. It's fun to talk about books, and it's fun to know that other people want to talk about books too. All right, take care, everybody.